ukuthi wena ngakufundisa ukudla ama-Weet-Bix because yazi ama-Weet-Bix uhlala ubona nje laphana uhlala uwabona bewa-advertise eboxini. They just put a plate and the Weet-Bix, they don't put the milk, so it had to really, I had to use my imagination in terms of how does this thing really work, and that was my solution. It worked for me at the time. Um, so um, I then progressed through high school. I focused on maths and science, and there was a stream that I eventually chose. My initial ambition when growing up, when people always ask the class in teacher with guidance, she will always ask, so what do you guys want to be when you grow up? I will always say, I want to be an architect. I had never met an architect in my life. I now have friends who are architects at least, but back in the day, really, the closest I would go to I came to an architect was just like baba Pine Town. So as the taxi was driving to Durban from Pine Town, there was this architecture firm that was on the side of the road. I can't remember the name, but it was something architects. So I just figured, it must be very nice to sit and think of creating a building out of nothing, and imagining something and saying, imagining something out of nothing and saying, okay, in this empty space, there's going to be a building that's going to be 10 stories high. It's going to look like this. It's going to have so many windows. It's going to have so many doors, so many floors. This is how it's going to look from outside. It's how it's going to look from inside. All that stuff really just using the imagination to create things that don't exist. I think in a way, I never got to become an architect. As you saw, I eventually became an engineer because mangifika matric, I realized ukuthi awekho amabhasari okufunda i-architect. That's the one hard realization. So eventually, I decided to do engineering because amabhasari engineering were many. I was very blessed to be able to pass my matric extremely well. I worked extremely hard. I would cross nights, belela abantu ngihambe ngivalele boarding school, ngivalele bathroom, net desk lami, and that dish. When I finished my matric, I was able to get an A for my maths, an A for my science, a B for my English, C for Afrikaans, and B for everything else. So, thank you. I must say though that in our school we had the worst math teacher in the whole world. Even the science teacher, like 2 days before the exam, the teachers were still trying to finish the syllabus. Like on the day of the exam, they were still trying to teach people how to do, what's this, this chemistry, no C, no H, I forget the carbon things. Yeah, but those are the things that one had learned in June or July on their own, and just learned and imagined what, even though we didn't have science equipment, so we just imagined what the reaction would look like. We never seen sulfur and magnesium, we never saw it, but we just knew, okay, magnesium, if I put water into it, it forms like a flamish type of thing or steam. So that was the environment that one was raised in, where it wasn't really all hunky-dory or all nice and easy, but really that hard work and real determination made ukuthi when my Puma results, at the time my results ayiphuma ephepheni, angazi mase aphuma ephepheni namanje. But after Puma results, I wasn't just a normal kid yasendwedwe. At the time, I was a kid with options. I was a kid who could become anything. I was a kid who could use a funde under tough conditions. One then was able to go to the same class nabantu abebefunda go St. John's, go Michael House, go St. Stephen's University, and fight pound for pound for, for a degree with them, whereas they had 10 times the money that our family had, or maybe 1,000 times. But with with that set of marks that one had, one was able to really have a bit more options. Okay, so that's the education part. Just to paint you a picture, Guti, I didn't fall from the sky. I I am a normal person who who grow up through challenges that most of us black people face, and God being good, one was able to be disciplined through that through that time, because there's a reason why I was born in such circumstances, because I wouldn't be the same person had I been born in different circumstances. So there was no mistake from 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 God's point of view in terms of how uh, how one was born and how one got to become an adult. So I will fast forward a few uh, paces a little bit. So after UCT, where I qualified as an engineer, uh, I realized that I don't really want to be an engineer. I realized that I don't want to be what I studied. In fact, that realization came when I was in my second year, or in fact third year. But since ekhaya umuntu omnyama ekhaya mobuya ngoDisemba kuhlale kubuza kuthiwa uqeda nini, uqeda nini. That's the one question that is always asked. Akubuzi ukuthi uphasile or anything, just to uqeda nini. One, because I had siblings who had to one had to support, because unfortunately when I was starting my second year, my mom just passed away suddenly, and she was the single parent at home. So there was January, just 3 weeks before school was supposed to open. Uh, Now there's young kids here who now looking at me with no plan in terms of how to go on in life, since their sole breadwinner had gone. So um, I won't bore you most of those details, but really from that point of being able, or being in a corner where suddenly one is almost an orphan uh, at 19, and having to support four other siblings who are looking at you daily, that forced in me that desire to say, okay, our parents left us a few policies and a bits of money here, not a lot of money. How do we make this money go longer? How do we not run out of money? So that also spurred in me that entrepreneurial drive of saying, uh, let me try and invest some of it, which I did. But also I started some businesses as well while I was a student, and those were very successful businesses, by the way. I think in my whole life I've started about 17 or so businesses. So it's always important to start small. So when you see us doing Livestock World appearing on TV, it's not the first business that I've been involved in. In high school, so in order to not to ask for pocket money from home, because I knew they didn't have money anyway, I would go to the local wholesaler, buy cookies, ogqwe, khona umakhe kwakuthiwa ogqwe, angazi uma sakhona yini. Lawo mawadla athi gqo. Ikakhe kwakuthiwa ogqwe. So I would go and buy them at the macro trade center lapha eSpingo, and I will sell them after dinner. After dinner, before the people went to sleep, they'll always go hungry. So that's how I made my whole pocket money in high school. And then in university, what I then did was to buy video games lawa dlalwa yingane. So ufaka 50 cent or 1 rand or 2 rand udlala game, and or Tekken 3 or Weber, those ones, the ones that in my shops. So in fact, when I was at UCT, there was a big business for me. So I bought, I think, 2 or 3 machines. Ngawabeka, ngacela imvume to put them at the residence where we stayed, and the house committee agreed and the boarding master agreed. Ngawufaka machine. Eventually, I say UCT in the main campus, in the cafeteria, I asked to get permission to put the video games there as well. And from those video games, I was able to go to the bank every Friday and deposit 3,000 rand in coins. And I was like 19, 20. Ebank base bengazi. Mase ngifika nami ngangifika ngihlale ngiphuza iti wale kusabala lama coins ami. You know, at a very young age, one really got to understand ukuthi there are many ways. There are many ways of making money. You just have to look and find an opportunity, find a gap. If the students are hungry and they need food, provide the food and charge them and they pay you. And if the students are bored, by stress, they want to distress, bafuna video game okudlala, provide the video games and make money out of them. So essentially those were some of the lessons that I learned. And so then ngaqeda-ke ukufunda UCT and I started working at a company called Accenture, and I'm fortunate enough we used to work at the same company with the bishop, where we also cut our teeth as young adults trying to learn the corporate world. So really coming then from being a 21-year-old, really that was one of the most important parts that I learned as a young person, in terms of saying one was exposed to opportunities that I never thought one could be exposed to. I remember in I think in my first or second week of working, I was sitting in the same room with bosses, senior managers of De Beers gold mines, and I was listening, not saying much, but I was a member of a team with two senior people, and I was with a team that was advising De Beers gold mines on how to do their budgets across the world. So it's something that one could never have imagined as one could sit across the table in a company that's now advising big companies on how to solve very big problems. So that was the work that we did. But as with every other business, after doing it for 5 years, I also got a little bit tired of it. The entrepreneur in me wanted to come out, and I tried while I was still working to do some other things. In fact, when I was working, I opened a gardening service business. So we ran a really good gardening service, really great. It was called Greener Pastures Gardening Services. We used to just cut people's lawns on Saturdays, sometimes during the week. We would hire we would hire from them some machine and as supervisors, they cut the lawn, and then umsebenzi wethu collect cash into custom. It didn't work according to plan all the time. I remember there was one time when I was doing some consulting work at ESCOM in Mekawat Park. One of the senior managers there was a client of ours. So this one time, labantu esibathembile bazofika bazokhatha igenge yaseKazi. It didn't pitch up. So mabengafikanga, he's kade ngim-advisor on big ESCOM things on Friday. On Saturday ngilapha kwakhe ngiphushi lawn mower laphana ngikhipha ama-weeds lapha engadini. And that's I was like, how old was I at the time? I was like 24. So again, that thing of humility. You cannot succeed in business if you can't humiliate yourself to learn, can't humiliate yourself to be humble, and ungabi namahloni ukuthi ngizolahla ama-point bazothina abantu if bengibona kade ngigqoke isuit Friday ngipholishe nezicathulo ecwebezela, manje ngomgqibelo sengigqoka idansana ngiphusha umshini wokugunda utshani. So and the customers appreciated that. So as a business owner, I care about their well-being so much that I'm not gonna say sorry abantu abafikanga kunesiteleka samatekisi or whatever other reason. If the customers want to be serviced, I'm there to service them myself as the owner of the business. So that's the thinking that still runs in even in livestock well to this day, where I'm a customer. Ama phone number ami ngiyawanikeza ukuthi okay uma abantu bami bengakusizi nayi number yami ungafona noma ngathi esikhathini ngizovuka ngi-attend into edingayo. So without that spirit, if you don't have that, you are better off being employed somewhere ungena ngo-8 uphuma ngo-5, because if you wanna be in business and grow in business, you have to give more of yourself than the time that you do between 8 and 5. So then gardening service, that was one of my businesses. So there in the gardening services, one learns a lot of lessons, and those lessons are important because who you become in business is a build-up of all the previous steps that you've been. So and also business is generational. So and business, you learn it by copying the closest person. So for example, you've seen how George Bush, his father was a president, right, of the United States. His father was George B. Bush, and the other one was George W. But can you see that having grown up in a family where your father is a president of the United States, and you see him every day, you see him angry, you see him sad, you go with him to the park, a young George W. Bush sees himself a better president than his father. So it's the same with business, and that my parents were and grandparents were into business, but not at the level that I'm in now. They did not create a company that's got income more than, say, 10 million rand a year, which one has been able to do. But also, I would think that my son, who is 8 years old, should be able to do better than me, because every day we can hear when I'm talking to clients, when I'm with him, when we are walking in the park and the customer phones, I have to attend to them. You can hear those conversations. And surely, if he takes over from me when I'm like 65, then he should be able to not start from zero, but start from a point of where I left off and build on from there. So even for yourselves, don't feel bad. Maybe you are not going to create a 100 million business today. Maybe you will create a 10 million rand business, but at least you are leaving a footprint that someone else can walk on and build on. So then that's the one other key takeaway of saying, start small, think big, and don't think ukuthi uzoqala namhlanje and nikusasa usosema newspapers, usuko Forbes magazine nakobani. Because if that happens too early, izoconfuse by fame. Uzoconfuse by fame, ukhohlwe ukuthi are you a speaker, are you a celebrity, or are you a business person? Because you can't be both. You can't be both. Even Nami, there are certain speaking engagements. Labantu bethi cela uzoba speaker la, and I refuse ngoba ngiyazi ukuthi if I do that, that takes time away from the business. I could be using that time to grow the business, but then if you choose to be a speaker, then be a speaker, and that's your business. Understand what your business is speaking, public speaking. And if you want to be a business person, you need to put in the time. Put in the time away from the limelight. One thing I love about being a child of God is ukuthi uNkulunkulu is also a farmer. Ngoba the one thing about farming, which is really important, is ukuthi you always start with a seed. And a seed, you have to put it on the ground. And once you put the seed on the ground, you don't really see it for quite a while. But when it's underground, it doesn't mean it's not growing. At some point, it's going to come out from the ground and sprout. And other people choose to eat the seeds. Other people choose to just want seeds they're going to go up too quickly, and don't want to put in the time of waiting where things are dark, where there is no sign of progress. Ubone now, everyone loves a farm. No one loves a farm when it's umhlabathi and ama-seeds asangaphansi, because that doesn't look appealing. But that faith of being able to say there's a seed underground, and in 3 months it's going to come out, or in 1 month it's going to come out. Let me continue ngichelele and water it. Let me continue ngifaka umanyolo. Let me continue removing the weeds. That's what creates a farmer. And I think that's the one most important thing I've learned, and my faith has helped me in business a great deal. Ekutheni uNkulunkulu my creator uAdam noEva akazange abathatha babeke Radisson Hotel eJoburg, or he didn't build a hotel for them. He put them in a garden. And what is a garden? A garden is a farm. There's a reason he put them in the farm, and Adam's job was to work the garden. There was his primary purpose. And because in life, if you apply the principles of patience, of diligence that the farmers do in everything they do, everything else, if you apply those same things, which is why God put Adam and Eve there, because he was trying to teach us something. Anything that comes too quickly fades too quickly. And it was trying to teach us those basic tenets of how to live our lives. Then things will transition now to then how I decide to do businesses that I do. Because for the most part, people always struggle to say, what do I do with my life? What business do I start? There are many opportunities. Abantu bahlale bekufonela ngala nangala. Abanye but now forever. Dayisuthi forever. Uzonza ama-million uhambe uye ema-holiday once every 6 months. Abanye bathi nayi forex, trade forex. Uzobona na uzohamba ngeLamborghini njengami kusasa. But that thing of deciding what to do with what to do in business is the most important thing. And one of the lessons that I learned when I was in the US, I'm glad Bishop was talking about getting out of your comfort zone. Sometimes you don't really get the truth being told to you. They want to be too nice about but one of the lessons I learned when I was in the US, and this one guy was talking about how to find your purpose, really what to do. And I've applied that same principle in how I start businesses as well, is to say, you need to find something that makes you angry. Find something that makes you angry. If seeing people ebara beguma queue makes you angry, if that really makes you angry, then you can take that anger, use it as your jet fuel or your petrol to then find a solution that will make you not to be angry anymore. By saying, if people are getting bad services at Para, I'm going and I'm angry about it, and I can do something about it. I'm going to be a doctor, and I'm going to start a cheap chain of surgeries where people can come in, get help quickly, bakwazi ugoduka emakhaya kusa early, bakwazi ukuthi bangahlali usuku lonke esibhedlela. So that being able to identify the stuff that really makes you angry, then can enable you to then find your solution to your anger, which then becomes your purpose, which you then apply in what you do next as a business. Because if you only do the business ngoba likufakela imali, ngeke uzulasta kulona. A business takes probably about 3-4 years before you start making any money. Even in livestock wealth, we still have not broken even. In other words, we still put a little bit of money at the end of the month, then we're supposed to until we, and it's already 3 years, we're going to be 3 years on the 13th. So now, if you're doing something that you're not passionate about, then it's gonna be very likely ukuthi uzosheshe ukhathala. And uma usheshe ukhathala uzogcina ungaziwa ukuthi wenzani. Namhlanje uposta ngalokho kuphele kufadabale, sasa usuposta ngalokho usuwenza lokho, and that's a signal ukuthi there's somewhere where you are not really truly aligned to your passion and not truly aligned to your purpose. So then that's the one giveaway there. And for me, one of the things that I was angry about is the fact ukuthi ekhaya mangikhula bezikhona iy'nkomo. There were just a few, not too many, about 6 or 7 cows. And those cows provided, I would say, 80% of the financial needs of the family. Mangikhula ubisi belingathengwa. Besisenga khona la ekhaya. Irama ibingathengwa. Ugogo was able kwenza butter from ubisi. Amasi abengathengwa. Ngoba lona lolu bisi lolu mawuhleli libekile nje laphana ulenze lungathinta ulithelisa lapha ekhoneni emsamo. Eventually gcina lo amasi. But then one then being living in the city, wonke umuntu living the natural place where they are born, where there's family, where there's a support system, and going to Johannesburg to try and earn a living so that sokwazi ukuthumela imali ekhaya. For me, that is one thing that I find is not right, in that one of the main reasons why our social fabric is the way it is today is because when the mine started in Joburg, people were forced to leave their families, and for most of them, their cows were forcibly taken from them. So when the cows are forcibly taken from them, now eventually umama wasekhaya uzobuza ukuthi manje baba uSibiya awubona ukuthi kumqondo omuhle ukuthi nawe uhambe uye eGoli ezimayini njengoSibeko. And then that created much of the social fabric that we have even to this day, where people go to Joburg, families are broken, there's no father figures at home, kids are growing on their own, trying to figure out their lives. Mothers are becoming fathers because their families are broken. Kuba nonkosikazi wasibili waseGoli, kuba nonkosikazi wesidwaba wasekhaya, and eventually, as you have seen, with how abantu baseGoli, you've seen amafilimu, umuntu kade sephuma eGoli useyabuya useyagula, usezogulisa nonkosikazi ekhaya, sekugula sekusala iy'ngane seziyi-child headed nani. So